Welcome back to It's Always Game Day in Cleveland. Daryl Ryder coming to you live from West Virginia. Andrew Berry kind enough to join us here on the podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, the vidcast, I don't know, whatever they call it these days. If I would have bumped into you when you were at Harvard, say around 19, 20, 21 years old, and I would have said, hey, Andrew, I hopped in my DeLorean can. I just want to let you know, you're going to be running the Cleveland Browns and be the youngest, highest ranking executive in the football community. What would your response have been to me?
I would have been like, is the date April the 1st? That's what I would have assumed, because at that point, working in professional sports or in a front office, I never really thought of it. Like, that was not even in my
calculus?
Yeah, it wasn't in my calculus at all. So I would have been very, very surprised.
So you're, if I remember correctly, you're a 4-year starter, right? Yep. For the Crimson, not the newspaper, the team. So let me ask you this as delicately as I can, because I want to continue the interview. What happened?
I tell you what, we had a good 4-year run there, Daryl. We won the Ivy League 2 years in a row. It was a fantastic experience for myself. Had a lot of success on the field, and I'm really thankful for Coach Murphy for recruiting me. And it was a very influential 4 years of my life.
Is that why you love corners so much? Is there an implicit bias built into you?
I was actually I was recruited. I was a high school quarterback. So first time I played corner.
All right, time out.
Yeah.
What happened?
I wasn't big enough. There, you can see as we're standing next to you. That's what happened.
Let's frame this up for the folks.
Like, if we're back to back, my gene pool, it didn't quite work out.
Neither did mine. Don't feel bad.
It was just before the shorter quarterbacks were in vogue in the NFL. So at least that's what I like to tell people. So made the position switch to corner. We had actually one of our senior all-conference players. He got hurt for the majority of the season, so the job was open. I was fortunate to win the job as a freshman, and then I had a 3-year stint where I was a first-team all-conference player and an All-American, and I love playing the position. So. Yeah.
All right. So can you name the last player from Harvard drafted? And I'm gonna be up front here.
Yeah.
I looked this up.
I gotta imagine it's Juszczyk, right?
There was one player right after him. That's who I thought it was as well. As I look at my notes here, Cole Toner in the 5th round, number 170 overall to Arizona.
I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know that one, because I actually went to Harvard that year to scout Cole, because I was up in the area. I totally forgot. That's right. He got drafted. He was a good athletic tackle in the Ivy League, and then he moved inside at guard in the NFL.
So what inspired you to, I guess, give up corporate America and go into scouting with the Indianapolis Colts? Because you started, you were grabbing coffee for folks type thing, right?
Yeah, I was grabbing coffee, making medical runs, holding chains at practice, getting Bill Polian the gas station hot dogs for his lunch. Like, I remember, I know, I was like, all those things. But
by the way, JW says hot dogs are not a sandwich, so just we covered that on the previous podcast.
Hey, we can't all be right all the time, right? So I mean, hey, hot dogs are pretty clearly sandwiches.
I am not getting between you and JW on that. I will not be responsible for any internal discord as a result of the hottest contested argument in pop culture history: is a hot dog a sandwich or not? But so you're in scouting with the Colts. You're doing all the menial tasks and obviously it takes a go-getting type of a personality to do that. And then you quickly start moving up the ranks.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to have a number of bosses that, one, gave me opportunity, and then two, didn't hold my age against me. I was very fortunate to come to the NFL under Bill Polian, who, in my estimation, is the greatest GM of all time. So I worked under him for 3 years. Went to the Super Bowl my first year in the league. I got into college scouting, advanced scouting. When we had Peyton and Reggie Wayne and Pierre Garçon, Dallas Clark, Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis. So it was a great training ground for football. And then when Ryan Grigson was hired, that was probably my next major step in the career, where Ryan came in. He didn't know me from Adam. His background was different than Bill's, and it actually allowed me to broaden my area of expertise. So with Ryan, I ended up overseeing pro personnel and then being the number 2 person in contract management. So it expanded my area of expertise within the salary cap, and player costs. And then later in my career there, that's when you really started seeing some acceleration of like the data boom in the NFL. Indianapolis was a very traditional shop, and I got to start building like a formative kind of research group within that space. And then I transitioned to Cleveland, first under Sashi and Paul, and along with Hugh, which obviously it was a tough 2 years on the field, but it was an incredible learning experience because Sashi's background was unique, Paul's background was unique. The way we were trying to accomplish sustainable winning was certainly different than the sport he had seen. But I learned a lot. Probably the biggest things I learned were really more in terms of like management of scale, because at that point I managed pro scouting, college scouting, scouting research arms, and even though I wasn't necessarily in decision making, it was a great training ground for overseeing different groups across the football operations spectrum.
Yeah, I confess, as someone who covered a lot of Major League Baseball, when the Browns hired Paul DePodesta, I wondered how hiring a baseball guy to help run an NFL franchise was going to work. And I talked to a lot of people around the game, and they said one of Paul's greatest strengths was organizational building. And candidly, that was something that the Cleveland Browns historically failed to do, which led to, well, the carousel, so to speak, both on the field and behind the scenes. So just the impact that Paul has had on your career, bringing in a little bit of a non-traditional perspective to the job in the organization?
I think with Paul, I think people forget that he was a assistant GM or GM in baseball for like 20 years. He's obviously known for the influence of using data and analytics in on-field decision-making capacities, but management is management at the highest levels of sports. And yes, the sport may change, but he has such a wealth of knowledge of being at a senior executive level, across a number of different organizations, that he's been a fantastic mentor to me, both in terms of how I think about whether it's decision making, hiring, managing, leadership, you name it, because even though like GMs are in different sports, deal with the same problems. Just right. The mechanics may be a little bit different, and to have someone who has walked those paths before has been incredibly valuable.
I would say probably the most unusual portion of your journey, at least from my perspective, is you leave the Browns for 1 year, and honestly, not even a year. You go to Philadelphia, and then you come back. For you, just how I get, maybe bizarre is the wrong word, but it almost feels like that's the most appropriate word, because you leave here, you go there, and the next thing you know, but at this time when you come back, it's your show to run.
It's we always joke it's like my internship year, but when I left Cleveland, I would have never envisioned return, because you usually don't return to the organizations that you leave, and certainly within that time frame. And I was very, very happy in Philadelphia, working with Howie Roseman, who I've mentioned before is one of my biggest mentors in the sport, and working with him in Philadelphia. But when the opportunity in Cleveland came up, it was unique because it was like, okay, you have the opportunity to return to an organization where you developed a lot of these really like deep, meaningful relationships, not just like in a professional sense, but in a personal sense. Because if you do go back to an organization, usually it's like way down the line, right? People that you work with the first time are gone, and that wasn't the case here. And I also had still, like, even when I was in Philadelphia, like I was invested in the Eagles, but I would also still always check the Brown scores, because I think that period 2016 through 2018 where you have a major role in terms of bringing on a number of like the young players, you still do have a little bit of attachment to see how their careers will turn out. So it was a unique fit for me. I was familiar with the people in the organization. I really liked the infrastructure, was familiar with the roster, and really felt like it went home.
Andrew Berry joining us on It's Always Game Day in Cleveland. 2 segments down, one more to go. Hang tight. More with the Browns EVP GM after this.